when you start to see the cliff edge of burnout, start walking backwards, like, because once you fall off it, it's a long way back up. It's really hard to get yourself back on your feet, but a lot of us don't realize that we're at the cliff edge until we do fall off it. And it's one of those things. There was a few warning signs for burnout for me that I wasn't aware of at the time.
How do you get 10,000 people to take a step to the left? What's behind the relentless mindset of a world champion? Why do teams of exceptional talent fail? How do you manage the pressure to perform? These are just some of the curious questions we will attempt to answer as we bring you world leaders, curious minds, exceptional talent, successful CEOs, and incredible human beings who know how to inspire great leaders and are inspiring great leaders themselves. I am Craig Johns, high performance leadership expert, international speaker, and CEO of Speakers Institute Corporate and World Sport Coach. This is the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong. Welcome to the Inspiring Great Leaders podcast. Our guest today spent 25 years as a detective in the New South Wales Police Force investigating, confronting, and dismantling the world of high-risk law enforcement. A world where you're up close and personal with drugs, outlaw motorcycle gangs, and homicides is not only confronting, it slowly wears you down through repeated exposure to high levels of stress, workloads, occupational burnout, depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. 2.5 decades on the front line of protecting human beings from the dark side of humanity resulted in our guest exiting from the police force in 2015 due to his own personal battle with workplace psychological injury. Since 2015, he has really dedicated his life to helping people improve their mental health through being a Black Dog Institute mental health education presenter, mentor for the New South Wales Police Legacy Program, Backup for Life, and founder of Mentality Plus. I have the privilege of sitting down and sharing with you an incredible human being who is a mental health, well-being, and resilience trainer and speaker, has educated over 30,000 people through mental health advocacy, and is the recent author of a raw and unflinchingly honest autobiography, The Cop Who Fell to Earth. Craig Semple. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Craig.
Beautiful. Now, look, we talk about you being a police officer in New South Wales, but I'm curious, where did you grow up and what was the big dream as you raced around the playgrounds at school?
Yeah, look, it was my dream as a young fellow was nowhere near where I ended up. It was I grew up in Ballantyne, which is around the corner from where I live now in Lake Macquarie. Brought up in quite a political family. My pop, who was my role model in my life, he was president of the Ironworkers Union back in the 60s, 70s and 80s. And so we had a lot of exposure to politics. But I grew up around, our house backed on some beautiful bushland, going all the way down to the Lake Foreshore. And I spent all my childhood with my brother and a couple of neighbourhood friends fighting wars in the bush and riding on push bikes and falling off them and doing all this fishing, all that sort of awesome stuff. And because I had such a love for the water, for the ocean, and for the environment, I wanted to become a marine biologist. That was my dream going through school. But don't know if it was a lack of academic ability or a lack of effort or both, and there was no chance of me ever becoming a marine biologist. So I Pop, as I was growing older, he started recommending thinking about the police force. And look, I certainly didn't consider myself being really tough as a young fellow. I was tall and fit, but I wasn't someone who, even being bullied at school or anything, I never fought back. I wasn't one of those sort of guys. My brother was more that way. But then, so I did give it some thought, and then I had a girlfriend in high school whose brother-in-law was a detective, and when I turned 18, he started taking me out for a few drinks with his workmates and sitting around listening to those guys talk about the job, as we call it. But like, any doubt that I ever had about joining the police force was extinguished at that point, because I just thought, what a life these guys are having, and I wanted a piece of it.
Yeah, so, obviously the life, it's obviously changing every single day. It is intense in certain aspects. But you talked about there being, maybe not the most confident kid, or not the most strongest kid, or not the person that would be confronting. So how did you find when you went into the police force, did you have to shift your mindset a lot, or did it really support you that you were a little bit more cautious in a way, or weren't that person that was going to take the first step forward?
Yeah, when I joined, I mean, the first place they sent me to was in the city of Sydney, a place called Redfern. There was a lot of problems at Redfern back in 80s, and it wasn't the place if you had too much caution. I don't think you'd survive it. But I don't know. I think I was only quiet through those young years of my life because I'd never really been like pushed and never really had my boundaries tested before. And once I jumped into that environment, I think because I was given that opportunity to really push my boundaries and to actually see what I was capable of, that's when my whole world just opened up in front of me. It was not only did I find that I was actually capable of at times having to use violence to bring bad people in, like when it was necessary, but I was actually like good at the whole scope. I was good at negotiating, I was good at communication, and when it became physical, I was good with that too. So it's sort of, I would never have had the opportunity to know what I was actually capable of if I hadn't have been put into that job. And I think it was one of the best things about law enforcement for me is that it always gave me that opportunity to see my potential and to, I don't know, for personal and professional growth, it was just unbelievable.
It's kind of interesting you talked about boundaries there, and I'm kind of thinking there are many people in this world who need someone putting the boundaries in place for them, and because they keep searching, right? Like until someone puts a brick wall or puts a road sign in place, you literally just keep going. Whereas there are other people that need to be pushed outside their boundaries, and that's a fascinating insight for you as well. Like that that you hadn't really been challenged or tested in a way. Was that more physically or mentally, or a bit of both?
Bit of both, for sure. It was, look, I guess for me, violence wasn't something that came naturally to me. I was, I don't want to sound too cliche here, but I was more of a lover than a fighter, in all honesty, as a young fella. But so I always did have a bit of a softer side to me. But I don't know. It's just, I think part of it was I really got hooked on adrenaline very early in my career. Just the excitement of the police work I was doing, and it wasn't just the violence side of things either. It was just, there was so much other excitement that we'd been exposed to with, high speed car chases and lots of, and even the work itself, going out in plain clothes and doing street level drug operations, undercover stuff. Even in my first year of policing, with no training in that field, and it was just so exciting. I became so addicted to the thrill of it. It was, I loved it so much, Craig, that when I had my days off from work, as much as I loved coming back and seeing all my old school friends and knocking around on weekends, I honestly didn't want to have days off. I loved my work so much. I didn't want any time away from it.
Yeah, wow. It's kind of like it's kind of like a drug, right? When, in a way, I mean, it's somewhat healthy, but maybe not. Like sometimes we think of things like that as a healthy drug. You're passionate about making a difference and being able to get there to solve a problem or dissipate something. But that obsession sometimes, that addiction sometimes, can actually become a negative long term.
Certainly did for me down the track. But a part of that addiction too to my job was the camaraderie. I mean, the bonds that we made between each other. I think that's one of the reasons why Redfern for me in those first 5 years of my career was so pivotal, because I always found that the places I worked with the greatest challenge and adversity, the bonds between each other became stronger because we're in it together. And so I fell in love with that aspect of it as well. It's like a massive, big family and I love my family in the police force.
So when you look back to when you're in training, did they prepare you for that, like that you're going to get excited and how to kind of temper that at certain times? Because you can get a bit gung shy when you start to get a bit confident and you're chasing that thrill.
The totally different culture back then. When we joined, there was none of that sort of mental preparedness at all. And even still today, there's not enough focus on preparing cops and educating them about about stress in general, about the whole fight-flight response, about adrenaline, the cortisol, all the stuff they really need to know. There's still not enough of it. But back then, we had none. And our training back in those days too was only 12 weeks. It was 12 weeks of just what basics you needed to know, and then they gave me a gun and a badge and sent me out on the street. But the training's a lot more intense and a lot more longer duration now. But we basically learned our trade when we got out on the street, because whatever we learned at the academy, that was the right way to do things. But you get out there on the street and you learn a whole different way of doing things as well. So because the demands are totally different.
Street smart is so important, in those situations, right? You can't just rely on a textbook and kind of, here's the procedure. It's like, well, the things are happening at light speed, and you have to, yes, you need that preparedness, you need exposure, etc., to make better informed instinctual decisions in a way. The intuition really kicks in when things are moving at a fast pace. It's not like making a decision on how much budget we're going to spend next year or how many clients we chase. Like this is happening at light speed. And so how do you, in those situations, you talked about the collaboration, the camaraderie before. When you're young, when you're in the police force and you've got to make decisions really, really quick, and you've got to rely on your gut a lot along the way, as well as a bit of intellect, thinking about what happens. How much support was there from the people around you? Would they guide you through those situations, or you're kind of left to kind of figure a lot of it out on the go?
No, I mean, at the start for the first, I think it was about 12 weeks, about three months, we're assigned a buddy trainer. And so that was a cop who's a field trainer in the police force, who got some experience. And I was really lucky because, the police force I joined, you probably heard, and lots of people would have heard, that we've had a Royal Commission into police corruption back in the 90s. We had our culture in the police force back then was really loose, a huge drinking culture, and lots of other stuff was going on as well. And it definitely wasn't a professional organisation back then. But I was really lucky. My buddy trainer, who I got straight out of the academy, was someone who had, for the time, really strong ethics and integrity. And he was methodical in the way he did his job, and he was very professional. And Matt taught me how to do the job the right way at the start, and which was important for me because at least I got that really good grounding. And then for where I went from there, that was going to be up to me. And a part of that was building my own brand and my own character, professional character. And I guess I built that from working then with a whole heap of other senior police over different times. And I would sort of see the right way and the wrong way to do things. And so I sort of, if there was one bloke or there wasn't many women in the police force back then, there was a few, but whoever I was working with, if I liked something or the way they did something, I would pull that in, and that would become part of my brand. And then if I didn't like the way some other person did something, well, that's, try not to do that. So I don't know, it was really, really good for developing my own character, which I then took forward through the rest of the police force as well.
It's interesting, we're talking about mindset and even well-being, and we're talking about that support network around you. I don't think it matters too much what industry it is. Many still fail, from my understanding, to really prepare people for what they're about to encounter, whether that's, into a leadership role, whether that's a coaching role, whether that's into the police force, whatever it may be. When you step into something, they might give you some tactics, they might give you some skills, but very rarely do they give you that support around emotionally, even physically, from an energy management point of view, how to really prepare yourself for what's coming up and to be able to be proactive around things rather than waiting till we have to be reactive because something's gone wrong.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we didn't have any of that. I mean, even back in those early days for me, we didn't have any psychological services. There was no employee assistance programs or anything like that. Everything was sorted out over a beer. And that's why we had such a big drinking culture. You know, it was just, we had each other's backs, and after something exciting or something, something horrible or tragic or really traumatic happened, we would deal with it by going for a drink together after work. And that even to itself, even though the drinking side of our culture was unhealthy, it did serve its purpose back then. And we sort of had a really good social cohesion outside of work as well. I think that, I don't know, I mean, the culture's changed a lot in the police force now. There's nowhere near that level of drinking. And I mean, after the Royal Commission, a lot of that was changed, but and it needed to be. But you also got to put something, you're going to take that social aspect out. You need to put something in that's going to replace that too. And I've noticed that, it's not just the police force. I noticed that in so many industries that I travel out to and work with now, there's just not enough emphasis put on doing a little bit of social work outside of your workplace so you get to know each other a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I find, in my experience in the police force, I probably saw an escalation in interpersonal conflict at work once that social aspect of the police force was gone, because people only got to know each other at work, and they never really got to know each other outside of work and see that the person that they might lock horns with all the time at work, they actually got so many similarities to them, and it's got the same problems, same challenges. And I find that in a lot of workplaces now that sort of we backed off on that side of things, and humans are really tribal and we're very social.
Yeah,
and it's important to have that aspect to it as well.
It's a really good pickup, and I was fortunate to be part of a New Zealand record, if not potentially a world record, of 272 games unbeaten streak in sport with field hockey. And it was 16 years, we didn't lose a game, and that actually won. So I never lost one because I was the first 5 years, but they lost the final the year before. But previous to that, they hadn't lost a game for 5 years as well. And when and at the moment, I'm going back to interview people and really try and unpack what was so amazing about that. And one of the big things that is really shining through, and we don't see this when people talk about high-performing teams, right? We don't see this, is that social component. And it wasn't a day where field hockey used to have multiple grass pitches. Everyone used to play at the same time. You'd be at the club rooms. To be quite honest, should I say this on air? Yes, I will. There were even times when the men's and women's would play at the same time. It'd be so cold, everyone would shower together, right? Probably can't do that now. And the social component was phenomenal. And now there's where we have artificial turf where they play nearly 24/7 on the damn thing. It took away that social connection, and obviously the changing in drinking cultures has also changed a lot as well. But when I look at high performing companies, high performing teams, they do have quite a big social component to the way they do things, and they do step outside from the normal way of business working, and they find those spaces to connect with each other. And so I think it's a really good important point that you bring up. And when we think about now where we've got teams that are working remotely or hybrid, this is a real challenge to try and keep that social component going. My team is fully remote and has been from day one, but I still find the time when I fly around the world, and even if I'm there to go meet a potential client or whatever it may be, I will try and organize a coffee or dinner or some drinks with certain people, like the people that are nearby, just to kind of continue to build where we can. And it's impossible to bring everyone together from around the world, but in those pockets, just try and keep that going. And I find that so important. If we don't, you kind of lose that fully understanding of people. And then, as you say, sometimes we just react or we respond in a way, not really knowing the full story, so to speak.
Yeah, totally agree. And even what you're talking about there about, learning from each other as well. And I think, this has got a whole heap of conversation going about working from home these days, and how that's are going to affect the next generation of leaders, because if we're not sort of working in, like, close to each other, and I just gave examples of how took on all these awesome strengths from a lot of people that I work with. If you're not having that interaction, I think it's going to be very difficult.
This is, all this talk about 4-day working week and even a 3-day working week. I'm hearing from some people, a lot of the things they're putting in place are very short-term productive, maybe some short-term performance. Long-term, it actually has a reverse effect, and they don't realize what's actually going to happen, because if you shorten meetings and it's just purely on, we've got an agenda, that's it, and you go and you condense the amount of work you're doing into a short period of time, you're going to lose this total social connection that is required to build high-performing teams, to build proper connections as a leader, to make sure you're having those right conversations, to even know what's going on in their own worlds, and pick up on cues when mental health may not be right, or when they're facing other challenges in their life. You may not pick up on those cues because you're just not getting in front of those people at the right time, in the right setting, to allow those conversations to happen. And as leaders, you play a bigger role than just the job you have to do.
Oh, absolutely. It's I mean, the last half of my career was spent in leadership roles, mainly middle management, which was probably the best years of my life. It was a big part of that. It's like bringing people on a ride with you, and it's pretty hard to do that if you're not spending time with them and nurturing them too. I mean, even for me as a leader, it wasn't just as a leader in insofar as my rank. It was also insofar as my role as a mentor and coach to those people, particularly younger cops. And I trained probably about 40 or 50 future detectives throughout my the particular last probably 7 or 8 years of my career, and it was like leaving a legacy, like bringing those people through, training them up, getting them to the point where they became qualified detectives like me. It was probably some of the most proud moments of my career was when those guys went out and became qualified detectives like me. And it was such an important thing. I don't know. It is going to cause some difficulties for a lot of businesses moving forward with the working from home. Depends on the structure and the nature of the work and the industry you're in, I guess. But I think we need to be together so much. And I think COVID sort of highlighted that for a lot of people. I mean, some people enjoyed that isolation. It depends on your personality, but others just craved that social connection. And I work collaboratively with a couple of guys who run leadership training. They're ex-cops as well, and we put a few programs together when it was time for people to come back to the office, and particularly in public sector areas, they were really having trouble. And you sort of go and we run these programs and just to get people back into the workplace to do a 1-day training session. And I talked a lot about gratitude at the end of the day, and a lot of these guys, when I asked them one thing to be grateful for COVID, some of them would say, like, I just realized today how much I need that social connection and my friendships at work and the fun and the laughter and that sort of thing. Because they had 2 years without it, they'd become really used to that isolation, which is not necessarily really good for us. We're not actually built for that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm a deep introvert, and so I love my quiet space. I love, I grew up on a farm. The nearest neighbor was a mile away, so to speak. But I'm also very socially competent, and so I was always in settings where I'd play sport, I'd be in teams, etc. And even now, yes, I'm working from home and do a lot from here, but I find those times to really be able to engage and connect with people, and I think that's so important.
Well, and the connection means so many things too. I mean, like I go out and meet thousands of people every year with the work I'm doing, but there's a difference. Like I meet them and I'll work with them, but we don't really have that solid bond. You don't really develop a real close relationship with them. So isolation can, even though I'm meeting thousands of people, I'm still quite isolated in the world that I'm living. So it's important for me when I come home that I've got some really good friends and social networks at home that I can go out and because I need that. So it's one of those things that I'm really mindful of.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah. We're going to go back into your work in a way. Like, you talked about the excitement of being your previous career, not what you're currently doing. You talked about the excitement and the thrill and the adrenaline rush of being in these situations, but you're also getting repeated exposures to some things that are probably not so healthy for us to see on a regular basis. And so in your 25-year career, was there a point where you started to really notice that maybe this is having a greater effect on me, the situations that I'm in and the things that I'm seeing?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of different landmarks in that. I mean, probably the first one was about 10 years into my career. My brother followed me into the police force, my younger brother, and without getting into all the details, I mean, he and his workmate tried to effect an off-duty arrest on someone who was trying to sell them drugs one night, and they both got stabbed. So my brother was lucky to live, and his workmate died on the street. And I was already doing drug work back then, and I was in a drug squad down in a regional area in New South Wales. And I don't know, it was probably the first. I always had a real passion for drug work, but it became a sort of unhealthy obsession after that because it got personal. And so I became really fixated and manic in the way I was doing my job. I just wanted to, I knew I couldn't do anything about the guy who hurt my brother, but because he was already in jail. But I knew I could go out and maybe get some satisfaction from going out and just trying to lock up as many drug dealers as I possibly could. So, it's probably the first time I started to really push the boundaries when it came to my stress tolerance. And but the good thing was back then I had enough self-awareness to know after a couple of years of doing this that something's not right. And I took a little spell back in uniform for a few months just to get away and acted as a circuit breaker. But then I moved up to the North Coast a few years later and look, I was surrounded by bikies and other stuff up there, and it was a pretty full-on environment. But I had one homicide in particular that was pretty brutal, and I didn't actually understand. This is the thing about education with mental health. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you don't know what to look for, the signs and symptoms, the risk factors, then you're not going to pick it up in not only you, but the people around you. So we were flying blind, and there was one homicide that it was a dangerous situation. It was basically, at the time, I felt there was a life-threatening situation, a firearm out, and I went into this house, which was a scene of a murder, and basically I was just so pumped on adrenaline at that time. The adrenaline I didn't understand at the time, but it really, as well as getting you combat ready physically, it also heightens all your sensory experiences, and so. Everything I saw in that house, everything I heard, everything I could smell, taste in the air, they've got, because I was so heightened, those experiences sort of burning deep what I was experiencing in that house in the moment, scrambled the way my brain processed all those experiences and later caused post-traumatic stress disorder. And I didn't realize it at the time, but that experience ended up causing me a lot of dramas. And then we worked on that murder for about 4 weeks. And eventually got the guy who did it, charged him. That was all good. And a couple of days after we cleared the murder, we had our detective's Christmas party. And unfortunately, one of our local bikie gangs had got early warning of it, and they brought some of their people in from interstate, and they came and crashed the Christmas party and attacked it. We had wives and girlfriends there, and I got glassed, and a few other people got pretty seriously hurt. And then a couple of weeks after that, I started having really bad nightmares about my work, and it made me about that murder. And I reckon that was probably the biggest red flag for me that something wasn't right when I started having these nightmares. And I guess, I had a real fear back then that if I told anyone about this, that my career would be over. And I was actually wrong in that assumption, but it was just because I'd seen other cops declare mental health problems and saw them exit stage left. I didn't want that happen to me. So, and it's one of the reasons I do so many lived experience talks now is to try to increase, this is workplaces all over the country, not just emergency services, but try to increase that, the levels of help seeking, particularly at the earliest possible warning signs, because it definitely makes a difference in outcomes. I did, and I guess we all fall back on our own coping strategies if we don't go and get the professional help that we need. And so my two big ones were the alcohol abuse. Like I drank a lot to try to numb me out and for some escape. But my biggest coping strategy, in all honesty, was actually my work. And I've seen this with and you would have seen this with high performers as well in the corporate world and others where, if they're struggling, we'll just come in and we'll try to outrun it. We'll try to bury ourselves in our work. We don't have to confront things if we're busy doing other things. And that was a big thing for me. I mean, my sort of work that I was doing in the cops, I could plug myself in the adrenaline socket of law enforcement and all my problems go away. And it was, it was just fully focused and wired into that work. But, mate, unfortunately, with and a lot of it was the work that I'd set myself, pick my targets to work on, bikies, drug dealers, murderers, whatever. And I'd work the job through and hunt them down over a period of time. And we get our result. And I'd sort of get that big dopamine hit from the reward. But then I'd need another one. And then I'd need another one. The next one would need to be bigger. So I was really manic in the way I was doing my job and fully adrenaline addicted. But, everything goes up, it's got to come down.
Yeah.
And everyone's got different tolerances for stress. But I pushed pretty hard for about 8 or 9 years, living on somewhere between 2 and 5 hours sleep a night. But just with this massive amount of, putting myself in dangerous situations on a constant basis, being under massive work demands with limited resources, over a period of time, it just burnt me out. And I had no idea about burnout, didn't understand it back then. But even though I had PTSD for 8 or 9 years, truly what really brought me undone was the burnout. And I think a lot more people are starting to become aware of the problem with burnout in our workplaces around the country now, which is good. But we probably still need a little bit more education and awareness of it. But basically, look, at the end of the day, all that adrenaline and cortisol was continually flooding my system. It became neurotoxic and led to burnout. And then I had a long battle with depression, and that was the thing that really floored me.
What I know coming from sport, where in sport, when you get recovery wrong, you can't run as fast, can't run as long, your reactions get slower, you make mistakes. It's super clear, like it's really defined. In the corporate world, though, unless you have a very physically demanding job, or you have a catastrophic event, in most cases, you don't know your energy is declining. You don't know that recovery is not enough. The body just keeps adapting. It's very, very clever. And so in most cases, right, we find it keeps declining. Everyone thinks they're kind of okay. Yeah, I'm still good. I'm not sick here, whatever. I can handle this. And then you hit Christmas time, right? You have a couple of days off and your body goes, hey, this is good. I'm going to punish you now because you haven't been doing enough of this. So I'm going to make you sick. And so it is really challenging because those signs are so subtle and very, very subtle. And so I think there needs to be, we were talking about before, what is that preparedness to the emotional, the workload you're about to take on in your corporate life or whatever you choose to do. There's not enough education in that space because from getting to a burnout phase, it's all about energy management. But if you don't know how to proactively put that in place from a young age, then you're a high achiever, you're someone that really likes to go after things, then you're highly likely to fall into that trap at some point. And if either you're not aware of it or someone else is not aware of it, you're going to end up in a big hole.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And I mean, I heard it of a psychologist recently who talked about burnout, and when you start to see the cliff edge of burnout, start walking backwards, because once you fall off it, it's a long way back up. It's really hard to get yourself back on your feet, but a lot of us don't realize that we're at the cliff edge until we do fall off it. And it's one of those things. There was a few warning signs for burnout for me that I wasn't aware of at the time, but when the last job eventually pushed me over the edge, was probably the biggest investigation around my whole career. 18 months working on one bikie gang, and there was so much involved in it. It would take too long to get into here. But towards the end of that job, and I was commanding that investigation, I didn't have any downtime. Even on my days off, I was working because I had people in the field 24/7, always bringing me for decisions to be made. The job was really fluid, so we had to constantly adapt. But towards the end of the job, things that I knew needed to be done, I was trying to find ways to, let's just not worry about that. Let's just find a way to wind this job up now, which was so out of character for me. I would normally want to push it right to the very end. But I actually started looking at it from a point of view that I'm just so tired now. I actually don't want to take it that next level. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Even some of the younger detectives who had plenty of energy left, they were saying, "Come on, mate, we're going to do this." And that was probably the biggest warning sign for me when I started to not enjoy the things that used to just energize me and make me feel so good and positive. When I lost that enjoyment for it, that was probably the biggest warning sign. But I didn't. I just kept plowing through, and that was probably the point where I should have backed off. But I kept on going, and I did push myself until I fell off that cliff edge. And look, at that end of my career, and so at the end of the day, if I actually got help all those years earlier, when I first started having nightmares, I'd still be in that job now. But I didn't. I just kept pushing through and went a little bit too hard. And I guess the lesson I've learned from that, Craig, is that, when I was at the police academy, we were taught how to do high-speed driving. And as an 18-year-old, that was pretty exciting. But I remember one of the instructors said to us, he said, "Look, guys, when you're doing a high-speed chase or some other urgent driving job, never drive at 10/10 of your driving ability, because if you're driving at 10/10 of your driving ability and something unexpected happens, you've got nothing left to navigate it." Yeah. So he said, drive at 8/10 of your ability, so you've got a 2/10 buffer. And it's funny how, you'd probably be the same, where you remember some things people said at different stages of your life. And I align that with stress now. Yeah. Like if you're running at 10/10 of your stress capacity, and lots of people can, and we do, and we manage okay, we love it. But what if something unexpected happens and you've got no buffer to navigate it? So stress needs to be kept at 8/10 or below, I believe, for most of the time. It's good for us in when we need it. But so for me, like, that last investigation, I was running at 10/10 of my stress capacity. But then my father-in-law died, so I had a tragedy in my family, which I was now dealing with as well. And all of these things just combined to push me over that edge.
Yeah. I always say that, burnout is a choice. One burnout that is a choice that is really, really hard to kind of avoid is if you're working full-time and you're a new parent.
Yes, well, all about that now.
Yeah, so you made the choice, but then it's once you're in there, though, it's really, really difficult to, because we need to procreate, right? We need to keep the human race going, but it's also, a real challenge. And, when you're talking about running at 10/10 at 100% at full capacity, when you're running a global business and you've got a young baby, you're working from home, you're working 100% capacity, and then something happens, right? And I've had a couple of these this year. Something happens, man. You just like, you don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. You're trying to shove something in there when there is no space to shove it in. It's like trying to fill the trash can a little bit more than it should have. And then things start kind of littering along the street because you can't keep up. Your mind starts to go. You can't think straight. You're not as productive anymore. You start getting a short temper. Everything kicks in, which is unhealthy. And sometimes, I noticed this year, I'm like, I'm aware of this stuff happening, but I don't know what else there is to do. I don't know what the choice is. And so I think and I'm someone who comes from a high performance background and deals with energy and management and kind of the mental space at times as well. It's hard in certain situations in life. So from your perspective, what are the kind of key things people need to look out for to prevent burnout from occurring?
Number one is have a wellbeing game plan. So that's a really important thing, is to, rather than wait till you're broken like I did, to learn strategies to help to live with stress and for the impact of it is actually be proactive and have all those sort of strategies in place now while you're actually well. And a lot of those strategies that I've learned through recovery, like particular meditation and mindfulness, this sort of stuff's never taught in the police force, and it's such a big thing, particularly when it comes to decompressing from particularly if you're in a job or have a role that's high pressure and you're under the pump all the time. And you don't have to be a cop to experience this. Lots of people can. I mean, you go home from work and you're still pumped from all the pressure you've been under work, and then kids are jumping all over you and they want to play with you and all those sort of things. Sometimes it can be a bit too much, and you need that time to decompress before you go back to domestic life. So things like learning meditation and mindfulness, I never did any of that in the police force, but I learnt it when I was out. It was a big part of my recovery, and it's still something that I use a lot now, which is important. Exercise is very important too. I mean, you know the benefits of exercise, but not just for your physical, but for your mental health. But exercise for me, while I was in the police force, that became a bit of a maladaptive coping strategy rather than a positive strategy, because I over-exercised.
Yeah,
I was very manic. Yeah, it was a way to try to outrun and escape things. So, but for now, for me, regular, moderate, and enjoyable exercise is the key to everything. If I don't train, I can feel my mood start to slip. So always do something every day. And I think it's because when you exercise, you're burning off all those stress chemicals out of your system, all the adrenaline, cortisol. You're getting rid of them. You're burning them off. So it is the number one best way to keep stress at a manageable level, but also even learning strategies like practicing gratitude and always trying to find positives in life. Because, I mean, the world is such a negative place now. We're getting bombed with so much negative media, social media and mainstream media. It's hard to get a positive view on the world. So learning little strategies like that, practicing gratitude, they're all things that and also I know this will resonate with you, is filling your emotional bucket up by doing something that really is meaningful to you, giving back through either volunteer work or some other initiative. Such an important thing too. I know you did a lot through COVID, and it's just one of those things where sometimes we're so busy with our working life, we don't think about maybe is there something else I could probably be doing that's really going to, because my emotional bucket, I'm emptying it all the time. Is there something I can do to fill that back up? And I don't know. It's one of those things I learned the hard way, but one of the biggest things in my recovery was going out and doing a couple of years working for the Black Dog Institute, traveling the country and talking to school kids and sharing some mental health education with them. And my interactions with those kids over those couple of years, thousands of them, really, it was just so beautiful. It was, and just doing that work really helped me understand the healing power of giving back and what it can do for you emotionally. So I think the key is just to have some really good tools, ones that fit you, that are really good for managing stress. And I guess if you can keep a list of what your stress warning signs are, and you just ticked a few off there, some of the main ones where you start getting snappy and short fuse, startle response, if you start getting annoyed every time someone asks you to do something else, all those sort of things and your sleep, obviously, if your sleep starts to fall apart, they're the warning signs where you just go, right, okay, I'm ticking all my stress responses now. What are all the things I've got in my life that I can draw upon to actually get that back under control? And so a wellbeing game plan is really important.
Yeah. You're talking about that's for yourself, right? Trying to awareness, maybe writing some key things down. If you've got a phone, maybe just grab a notes thing and just go, you put stuff in there and maybe just add ticks every time something keeps showing up. And then you might be going, oh, that's showing up a lot right now. I need to deal with that. But from a colleague or a life partner or or a mentor, etc., what are some key things that we can be observant of? Obviously they're probably similar to what you're seeing, but what should we be looking for? But then also, how do we approach it with someone that you kind of feel, look, hey, they may be struggling here, they might need some help? How do we approach that?
Yeah, look, it's I teach mental health first aid courses. It's basically 2 days of training doing exactly that. And it's, look, I guess the basics are not always is it going to be some sort of big jump out of the box sign or symptom that's going to hit you in the face and say, wow, geez, Craig's really doing it tough. He just like ticked that box. I learned about burnout. Or sometimes it's just even little, far more subtle things. And the way I describe it to people is when you start noticing things about the person that you're interacting with that are just a bit out of character for them, they don't have to always be some sort of big neon light sign or symptom. It could be just something really subtle. Then you start like sitting back and taking a bit of notice and might maybe join the dots between some other things as well. And I mean, some key ones will people be talking about, I'm sleeping poorly, I'm not going too well, I'm really tired, blah, blah, blah. I mean, they could be really obvious, but sometimes it's just little things. But if you are worried about someone, it's important not to ignore your concerns. And I guess the 5-minute sort of rundown of what to do is, number one, is to plan a conversation with that person if you can. Pick a time and a place that's really suitable, where you're both going to be comfortable, where you can maintain confidentiality, privacy. That's important. And then outline the reasons why you're worried. Say to Craig, mate, I am worried about you at the moment, and I'm worried because, and you dot point all off the things that you've noticed that have given you that concern. Then it's a time for you to sit back and to open your ears and to listen to what they've got to say, and non-judgmentally as well. Listen to how they're feeling about the whole situation, and then the next step is encourage action. Whether that might be, just putting some things in place to self-care type things, or whether it means going to a professional, going to the GP or a psychologist, and getting some professional help for it. But at the end of the day, so for some people, it can be really, you can only lead a horse to water. And it can be really frustrating when someone's really struggling, but they can't see it. So, I mean, there's lots of tools out there you can get around with that too. The Black Dog Institute's got a great tool called the Online Clinic, and it's like a self-screening thing that you can do. It's like a self-test. You go through and answer questions about your life in certain time frames, just with clicks on multiple choice type. And it gives you a score at the end of it. It's only 10, 15-minute exercise, and that can be a really good one for helping people to understand whether what they're going through may be a little bit more serious than what they've given credit for. So that's for anxiety and depression mainly. But look, at the end of the day, if people don't, even if they do accept they've got a problem and they don't want to go and get that professional help, you can't really force them to unless they're critically suicidal and you think that their life is in danger. But other than that, it's basically it's just taking the time to check in on them from time to time. Letting them know that sometimes people go away after having that initial conversation and maybe give it a little bit more thought, maybe do a bit of their own research and come to some awareness down the track.
You've had a 25-year career in the police force. You're now forging a great career in kind of the preventative and even, I suppose, rehabilitative components of mental well-being and mental health. For you, what's next for you over the next, for the rest of your kind of working career? What do you kind of see? And when you look back, maybe once you have retired, I mean, if that's something you ever want to do, what for you would you like to look back on your life and go, hey, I'm really proud I made an impact in this area?
Well, I was talking about gratitude, as much as I didn't want to see my police career end, the fact it did, and it's given me, even though what I went through was so tough, it's given me an opportunity for another career now, which is just as fulfilling, if not more, than what the one I had before. So I feel very blessed that I've had that opportunity. And I think for me, I don't think it'd be one thing that I would look back and be more proud of than the other. I think it's a cumulative thing. It's something the way I've always, probably the easiest way to say this, the way I've always looked at my life is that I've done some stupid things in my life and some things that made some big mistakes and in my personal and professional life. But I think if I get to the end of my life and I can look back and say, well, mate, you did way more good things than bad things in your life, that's a win for me. And where I go from here, I don't know, and it's mainly because I know some people like to have 5-year, 10-year plans, but my life has hit so many different hurdles and roadblocks at different times, and there's been so many divergence that I just sort of strapped in and I'm just going for the ride now. It was so as much as I want to build my business and keep on going with it, I'm also very mindful to keep my feet on the ground, not to get too carried away myself. I know I was mentioning to you before, I've got a second book that I'm working on now as a mental health resource. I don't know whether I want to get into writing full time or keep on doing the work I'm doing with mental health. But it's the job I'm doing now it's because I'm running my own business. I can sort of help. With some degree, I can dictate the speed and the amount of work that I'm taking on. I've just got to be aware that it comes down to that awareness and not taking on too much. But I could keep on doing this forever, in all honesty. So we'll just see where it goes, Craig. I don't know. Life's awesome. That's one of the best things I love about it, is that you just don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah, and for those who haven't read Craig's book, The Copy Fell to Earth, recommend that you go out to all good bookstores and grab a copy of that and keep an eye out for a future book. You can see right now that, sometimes the adrenaline, the intensity, the chase for something takes us off the earth, so to speak. It lifts us up and we need to be grounded. And it's great to hear that you're very grounded right now, that you're giving back, you're making a difference, and you're just quite happy, as you say, going along for the ride rather than trying to create the ride, so to speak. And we have those phases in our life, and we need to kind of decide what point. I still remember a 6-month kind of early retirement or midlife retirement I had a few years back, and the positive difference that had on me at that moment was so crucial. And so I think we need to be very proactive in the way that we look at our life, but also be very grounded and enjoy what was going on at that same time. So yeah, which is awesome. We all know smart people have great answers, but the most successful people ask great questions. When was the last time you did something for the first time?
What can I say to that? Doesn't matter what interviews you do, someone will come out with a question like that, and it's very rare that I'm lost for words. And I'm not going to say I've published a book for the first time, because everyone knows that. Oh God, I've got to think of something better. I bought a boat at the start of COVID, and I'd never. It's an old cabin cruiser. It's been broken down for nearly the whole time I've had it, actually. But actually jumping out of I like challenging myself, jumping out of my comfort zone, and jumping into this thing and learning the ropes of sea life on a boat was probably I've never done that before, so that was pretty cool. My partner's tried to talk me into doing parachuting. There's no chance that's ever going to happen. I was too scared of heights. But I don't know. What have I done lately that's the first thing I've... Mate, I don't know. You've got me.
The boat's a good one. I like the boat.
Is that all right?
You've had a conversation with me today. That's the first time you've done that.
Yeah, well, that is true too.
What is the one question that you would love to solve?
I would love... the one question I'd love to solve is how we get people back together again. Honestly, there is so much division now, and I don't know where it's going to go. With particularly politics and beliefs, and it's just this massive divergence now, and I would love to know how we get that back to the center and get people back on talking to each other again rather than shouting at each other. That's probably the one thing that really upsets me about the world now, is that there's people have got their own opinions, but now they want to yell them rather than discuss them, and I would love to bring that back somehow.
Yeah, beautiful. I think we've made strides in certain areas of communicating and being more vulnerable, but then as you say, sometimes you just look at it and go, maybe we're going completely opposite way in certain aspects of life.
Yeah.
For you, what is an inspiring great leader, and who is a great example of this for you?
Look, I've had the pleasure of having a few. I would probably use my pop in that role. So I had great leaders in the police force, but as far as life goes, my pop was probably the most inspirational. He was very successful in his professional life, obviously in industry, but he sort of set the bar for me when it came to true manhood. And when I'm talking about that, there's a lot of people talk about masculinity, and I've heard the terms toxic masculinity and that sort of stuff bandied around. But being a true man, like he was, he made it very hard to reach his standard. Like he was very family orientated. He had such integrity. He was very calm all the time, but he did so much for other people. I guess he was probably, as far as life goes, it would be him. But I had also one of the guys I'm working with the leadership stuff now. He was the guy who really was the reason why I joined the police force, and he's always he retired as a detective chief inspector. He was someone who I always looked up to, mainly because of the fact that he was also had high integrity, but he was very smart. And he was always ambitious, and he was always doing some amazing work in the police force. And I guess I always wanted to be like him as a cop as well in that professional role.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yes.
You've got some remarkable insights, some great experiences and exposures to life that you are sharing with people, and you have some real easy to understand and easy to apply ways of approaching mental health. Not that it's an easy thing to tackle, but you're sharing lots of great insights here. How can people learn more about what you do, and what is the best way for people to connect with you?
So I've got a website, Mentality Plus. I don't even know what the website address is. I'm not very tech savvy, but it's up there. You put Mentality Plus in, and it'll come up as the website. There's some of the programs that are listed on there. You can get me through emails, craig@mentalityplus.com.au. And the Black Dog Institute, you can get in touch with me through them as well, and other organisations. But that's probably the main ways, through my email and my website. On my website, there's actually a contact form on there as well. But if anyone needs any mental health work in their workplace, wellbeing stuff, speaking at conferences, anything like that, just sing out. I'd love to get in contact. Beautiful. And the book's on sale. I mean, you can get that all over Australia. You can get it internationally on Amazon and Booktopia, and other online forums. Big W, Target, all the big bookshops have got it. Get it at the airport, sitting there waiting for something to do while you're waiting for a delayed flight. Pop into the bookshop at the airport and grab it.
Yeah, lovely. All right, we'll pop those links, not probably all the bookstores in the airports, but we'll put the links for people to connect with you on the show notes. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today, Craig. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your vulnerability into I suppose the amazing things that you got to do in the career in the police force, but also those challenges you face and the hurdles you had to try and overcome, and some barriers that kind of came into place that you probably weren't expecting at different times in your life, and be able to help us understand what are the tools to try and prevent those situations from happening, but also to be able to respond when things don't quite go our way, when we haven't quite seen the signs pop up, or maybe we've seen them but don't know how to deal with them, or kind of going, you know what, I'll be all right, I've managed life so far. Really, really helpful. And you've been through an extraordinary career and a great service to the community in both the police force, but even more now, and dealing with the things that keep people being humans, that allow us to live a healthy life. And when things don't quite go right, and for anyone out there who thinks the world is going to always be amazing, things will challenge you. And so for the work that you're doing in there, from kids right through to your seasoned leaders and professionals, thank you very much on behalf of everyone around Australia and those that learn from you around the world. We really appreciate it, and I look forward to reading the new book next year. So good luck writing that. Can't wait to see it. But yeah, thank you for your time today. It's been a great conversation.
It's very kind, Craig. Thanks for having me on, mate.
It's time for you to join the Inspiring Great Leaders movement by visiting craigjohns.com.au. Share this podcast on LinkedIn and be sure to hashtag Inspiring Great Leaders. We would love it if you could leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Drop us a line with your feedback and questions and connect with us on the Craig Johns LinkedIn, Facebook and Instagram pages. Be sure to check out the next Inspiring Great Leaders podcast, where the ordinary don't belong.